Hello and welcome everyone. This video is going to deal specifically about the contingency. So the contingency is in 2.0 is one of the three crises you can encounter in the late game, and it's so far the most difficult and the hardest one to deal with. So the first thing we're going to understand is why are their ships so powerful? Let's take, for example, our ordinary crisis contingency fleet. So the contingency fleet consists of two types of ships. They have battleships and they have destroyers. So let's see their combination of weapons. So we have the battleships. They have a barrier point defense as a tier 2 point defense, medium lasers, large plasma, and a tachyon lance, a particle lance actually. And their seekers, their destroyers, consist of two medium lasers, one medium plasma, and a neutron torpedo. The first thing we can understand is that the contingency fleet relies purely on energy weapons. And what does that mean? That means that shields are the most effective way to shield against their fleets. So you want to stack on your ships as much shields as you can carry. Armor is absolutely useless against them because energy weapons just melt armor. So this is about the defensive strategy. So what about offensive strategy? So you probably noticed that they don't have any small weapons, right? So they have only most of their damage comes from their particle lance and their large cannons. What that means? That means that their weapons are fairly inaccurate against small targets. It also, another thing that if you will have some experience with contingency fleets, you will notice that most of the damage of their ships coming from their battleships, actually. Their tachyon lance and large plasma are the real problems that causing so much losses to your fleets. In terms of their defensive capabilities, we can see that they have high amounts of shields, high amounts of armor, but pretty low amount of hull points, almost twice as less as their armor and shield values. So this means that there is one option of trying to go through their shields, then go through their armor, and finally to their hull points. This is just going to take so long and cause so much casualties. Instead, why not just utilize these low hull points and go with weapons that can bypass them? So there are two types of strategies I found very useful at dealing with their ships and utilizing this weakness. So the first one is battleships, right? So battleships might at first seem to be ineffective against them. I mean, you might think their tachyon lance are just going to melt your battleships, right? Because they don't have any evasion. This might be true, but there's another thing that it's important to understand. When battleships engage other enemy fleets, the first thing they prioritize is engage enemy battleships. What that means is, since we want to clear those, this means that once those battleships, our battleships, will get in contact with contingency fleet, they will first open fire on their battleships and not on their destroyers. Really, the destroyers are just cannon fodder. Their job is just to soak fire so the battleships can do the main damage. That's the thing with the contingency fleets. If you can disable the battleships as quickly as possible, you're doing it just fine and you're going to crush them. This is exactly on this point of ship behavior we are going to rely. So we are going to use weapons that ignore shields and armor in order to directly go and hit the hull, which has fairly low amount of points. How are we going to do that? Well, with the weapons that actually can do this job. That would be the arc emitter, which ignores shields, ignores armor, and goes straight into the hull. And we're going to use medium phase disruptors. Medium phase disruptors are the small cousins of the arc emitters in the medium slots. Now, for this specific playthrough, I do not have the large slot of the medium disruptors. That would be the Cloud Lightning, which is the only way to get that tech is to kill void clouds and research their technology. So if you manage to grab those cloud lightnings, instead just configure your ship with as much large slot as you can, stuff cloud lightnings, and you're good to go. If you're like me and you wasn't lucky enough to find void clouds, medium disruptors will absolutely do the job. And on the defensive side, we are stuffed with as much armor as possible. I decided not to use hunger slots because they take lots of power, a useful power which I could stack another slot for shields. Also, Strikecraft is fairly useless, to be honest. So far, as of this video, they do barely any damage, so I highly recommend against them. Finally, we want as much accuracy as we can, so the battleship computer is set to line and it gives an additional chance to hit. So let's see how this works out. In terms of how many battleships to bring, I brought 2 fleets of 190 command limit cap battleship maxed fleets. That would be 23 battleships per fleet, in total 46 battleships with a fleet power of just less than 190. And this is your typical, slightly more powerful than your typical contingency fleet. Usually they run with 10 battleships and 20 cruisers, so this is a slightly more advanced fleet with a very good admiral. This is going to be our target. So this is going to be an interesting test on how to deal with them using the battleship method. So I've already set the ground, and those contingency fleets are almost at the contact point with our battleships. So they should arrive there in just a moment, and we can see how our battleships perform against the contingency. We will set our battleships into intercept, and so notice what the first thing that happens is that the battleships are focusing the enemy battleships and not the destroyers. And this is the most important thing to avoid as many casualties as possible. And the battle is done. The contingency fleet is no more. In just a few moments, they were completely wiped out. We took exactly only 6 losses. Out of a force of 46 battleships, we lost only 6, which is extremely quickly to replace. So this is a very effective strategy against killing contingency fleet. The only thing you should know that battleships, the main disadvantage of this method is that battleships are expensive to produce, they're expensive to upkeep, and they're very, very slow. So if you want to reinforce them, make sure your shipyards are close to the front line. For example, Jumia is one of my main space yard production planets to reinforce ships on the front lines as I fight off the contingency. If you don't do that, your battleships since they're very slow, it will take them huge amount of time to arrive at the front line, so make sure to keep that in mind. So this is about the battlefield strategy. Now there's another strategy which is slightly less effective, but effective nonetheless. This is using a different type of ships, and that would be corvettes. So what's good about corvettes? Well, corvettes are very evasive, and while they will not focus their battleships first, they have very good chance to dodge the contingency most powerful weapons, namely the tachyon, the particle lens, and their large plasma cannons. So how do we equip our corvettes? So we have 2 corvettes for this job. We have the main one and the bulk of our corvette force, our torpedo boats. So you probably notice that once again we are using the strategy of ignoring as many layers as possible, shields or armor, and get to the hull. So there's your disruptor, small one, and devastator torpedoes. Now, what's so good about torpedoes that missiles, for example, don't have? Well, torpedoes first of all ignore shield, right? So you effectively ignore the first layer of defense of the contingency, and then you have to deal with armor. So here's the good thing about torpedoes. Torpedoes deal double damage against armor. This means that although they do not ignore them, with their high damage, they will remove them fairly quickly, allowing them to immediately strike the hull. And since the Contingency has very weak point defense, which is only mounted on their battleships, which are few in number, Devastator torpedoes will usually just overwhelm the point defense. However, to slightly improve the performance and still counter their point defense, we also make a second type of corvette that would be armed with wire-wound missiles. You don't need a lot of them, just maybe 10 or 15 per fleet, and their solely purpose is to distract the point defense from firing at your torpedoes. They are armed with wire-wound missiles, which just misses the point. They have high hull points and they are good at overwhelming point defense. So this is your typical corvette fleet. So right now I have two corvette fleets which sustain some losses from the previous battle, but they will do the job just fine. And we're going to send both of them and find ourselves a contingency fleet to kill. So let's go deeper into enemy territory and find ourselves some targets. So of course it would be best for them to be maxed out in terms of fleet capacity, but it's really not that of a big deal. We should still be fine. Let's find ourselves the closest contingency fleet and get us into a fight and see how the corvette tactic performs against the contingency. Another, by the way, good method to transfer battleships fast from point to point is jump drives. If you have access to jump drives, you can just skip quite large distances by just directly jumping to the system. So this is a good thing to do. And we'll just keep moving till we find somebody to fight off. Seems the contingency fleets have all but gone. The most important thing about dealing with the fleet is that as long as you can pump more reinforcements and progress into their territory faster than they can put ships, that they can reinforce and bring more fleets, then you are on your way to victory and eventually defeating them. So I don't really know where are their fleets. Okay, we found one. Excellent. Let's set course to intercept. And here's a small tip. Never engage contingency fleet near neutron stars that nullify your shields. That's a death sentence. Since you have no shields to defend against the contingency fleet, this is a recipe for disaster. So this fleet is going to move out of the system once that station will finish construction, and that is perfect because this is by this time we should be in position to engage them. This is your most common fleet, and alright, so the contingency is on the move and they are on the way to us. So we're gonna clear this little fort and proceed to engage them. There we go. And they should be arriving at this section. There we go. So let's see how this plays out. You see that the first one to die are the destroyers, which is not ideal, and the battleships will fall last. Still a victory nonetheless. Let's see how many losses we took. So we took quite some losses. We lost 35 plus 18. That's around 53 corvette losses. And in terms of how many battleships we lost 6. So we've lost, in terms of corvettes, we lost like 48 corvettes. So more or less the same. Also taking account that this fleet isn't maxed to its maximum command limit. If we had more corvettes, we would probably won this fight with less losses. But nevertheless, another excellent tactic to win against the contingency. The big bonus of using corvettes is first, they are very, very cheap to produce, very fast to produce as well, and they move quickly around from system to system. Means that you can reinforce your fleets very quickly, since corvettes are very, very mobile. So this is the bonuses of using corvettes. 2 very useful tactics against the contingency. Bear in mind that if you want to assault the homeworlds, which have far more fortified fleets and they have stronger fleets and their hub, you just need to build more of those. Like maybe if you want to go with battleships, just build another fleet, maybe a third fleet with 23 battleships. You can even mix some corvettes with torpedoes, make a mixed fleet and attack. Both works perfectly fine. Make sure you have pretty much the same ratios, maybe like 75% of their fleet power, and you should do just fine. And that's about it. That's about the contingency. When you know how to fight them, they aren't that scary anymore. I will also add that during all this video, I did not have the Defender of the Galaxy perk, so this was without that perk. And that's about it. I hope you found this video helpful, and hope you will have better success now against the contingency from 2.0 and forward. And that's it. And if you like this video, feel free to like. If you have more questions about the contingency, feel free to post it in the comments. And that's about it. I'll see you in the next video.